Here's some Me Too news. In black churches, pastors recognize a Me Too moment among their clergy. It was a sweltering weekday morning, and the vibe inside Reverend Rosalind Brookins' Los Angeles home was festive. 10 women, all professionally accomplished, most ordained pastors, had gathered in Brookins' living room to talk about a painful but little discussed crisis: sexual harassment in the black church. No shit. As Brookins passed out folding fans for the heat, the Reverend Naima Let, a TV actress and producer, opened it with a prayer. We ask that you bless this conversation, that the truth set us free. Over the next 2 hours, the truth came spilling out. The room felt like a party, a church meeting, and a group therapy session with revelations and confessions that prompted tears, disagreements, and plenty of laughter. Black women, the backbone of their churches, who far outnumber men as congregants, are in a bind that is historically unique. The black church responds to black male clergy like they're demigods, very revered, said the Reverend Najuma Smith Pollard, who convened the women as part of her work for the USC Dornseth Cecil Murray Center for Community Engagement. You don't rat out your pastor. You don't bring the man of God down, she said. If a pastor is caught in an indiscretion, sometimes he gets moved, but a lot of black churches are not organizationally led. There is no board, so even if there is misconduct, there is nowhere to turn. Even now, she said, a woman is likely to be asked, "What did you do to provoke it?" The message I kept hearing growing up was, pull your skirt down, close your legs. A group of black female pastors, professors, and theologians meet to discuss how their churches handle sexual harassment and assault. Many of the women spoke of being molested or harassed in church and the pulpit, of feeling helpless, unsupported, with some finally questioning whether they belonged in church at all. The Reverend Stephanie Butler Adams, a former professional dancer, said she was invited to perform as a liturgical dancer at a megachurch in Texas. After her performance, she said the pastor approached her lasciviously and, reaching for her skirt, asked if he could touch the hem of her garment. He didn't mean it as a gesture of respect, she told me. We are violated before we preach, while we preach, after we preach, said the Reverend Deborah Mans, who is opening a home for young women who have been victimized by sex traffickers. I am on fire for God. I love preaching his word, but it's hard to preach at a church and you go to the pastor's office and the first thing he asks you is, what color are your panties? Or he puts his hand on your knees. Or he stands up behind me and holds my waist. Or after the sermon, he hugs you and holds himself against your breast. Or asks you to go to a restaurant because I haven't had enough of you yet. We become so broken. The Reverend Monica Coleman, a theologian at Claremont School of Theology who has written about church responses to sexual violence, said she's been in the ministry for more than 20 years. And in that time, I can't even remember how many gross, inappropriate things were said. It becomes normalized. A pastor once said to me, I would love to perform cunnilingus on you. I was like, what? If he said this to me, a person with a PhD, not in crisis, not grieving, whose work is around sexual violence in the church, what does he say to vulnerable people? I called my friend who introduced us, and he said, yeah, I'm not surprised he said that. I was like, damn, people. Tasha Morrison, a minister who works for the Transportation Security Administration at Los Angeles International Airport, said, that goes to a culture where black pastors know we won't say anything. And when we don't, the cycle continues. The conversation soon turned to the televised memorial for Aretha Franklin and the bizarre moment when Bishop Charles H. Ellis III appeared to grope the breasts of singer Ariana Grande when he puts his arm around her back after she sang a tribute. Grande pulled away and seemed uncomfortable. For most of the women here, that was a perfect example of the almost mindless harassment that occurs in the church. The world said, "What are you doing, brother?" Letts said. He was caught and exposed. He was probably scratching his head. "I didn't do anything different from what I normally do. Why are you tripping?" But Reverend Aquila Walker thought his gesture was misinterpreted and disingenuously amplified on Twitter and Facebook. "Well, I think there is a lot of misogyny and silencing in the black church," she said. "I think that social media has sensationalized these issues to make them more than what they are. I think it's grossly unfair to suggest that Bishop Ellis is always groping." "Even if he wasn't," Smith Pollard countered, "a lot of people thought he was. As women of God, we have to be comfortable calling someone out, even if what they're doing is slight or subtle. Even if Ariana Grande wasn't triggered by it, other people were. If I see someone doing something to you, it's like, yo, sis, you don't have to take that." Smith Pollard is already planning another conversation like this one, but next time she said she will include men. I don't know why you would include men. For the longest time, Letts said, "I was literally thinking we're just going to have to wait until the old regime dies and train up the new ministers in a new way. Why don't you just have an all-female church? You wouldn't have it." She laughed at her naivete. After all, older ministers are role models for younger ministers, and no one gives up power without a fight. I don't want to seem naive either, but these women are formidable, brilliant, and strong. They will change their churches. It's just a matter of time. That is from the Los Angeles Times. I'm really curious. Well, there is harassment that goes on in the black church. A lot of it. And a lot of it by the pastors. And it doesn't just happen to women. But women are the ones that tolerate it. It's not like it's a male-dominated sphere. And the women actually, some lust after it because I've seen that. Some are victims of it because I've seen that too. I've asked women for, 20, 30 years, why do they allow this to go on? And the first thing they say, that the idea is to train up new pastors. Like that's going to fix the problem. The thing is, like I always say, especially in the black community, if there's something wrong, it's always the men's problem. It's never the women's problem. It's your church. The vast majority, I would say like 80% of the members in a black church are probably female. And they could easily replace a pastor, move a pastor, put in a female pastor if they want, but they don't. Why do they crave male leadership? Why do they protect pastors when they know that the pastors are sleeping with the parishioners, sleeping with the members, sleeping with the young girls, sleeping with the older women, sleeping sometimes with the men? The focus is never on changing the women. The focus is always changing the men. But that's what feminism is about. It's not about changing the women. It's about tamping down the men so that you get men that are more appreciable to your agenda. Which is why there's no men in the black church in the first place. Because if you had more men in the church, you would have a lot less of this rather than more of it. So to say that sexual harassment can happen in a male-dominated sphere is absolutely bullshit, because the black church actually proves this is a female-dominated sphere. And yet this stuff goes on. In fact, it's more rampant in a female-dominated sphere than it is a male-dominated sphere. Because in churches where it's male-dominated, there's a whole lot less of this stuff, because guess what? The men aren't going to allow you to sleep with their daughters. The men aren't going to allow you to sleep with their wives. The men aren't going to allow you to run through the whole church and sleep with everybody. But the women are. But the answer is not to change the church to where you're going to get more men in, because that's not the idea. The idea you can see from this particular article is to breed men that are acceptable to them. And I probably can tell you that the only thing is you're going to have less aggressive pastors, but they're still going to sleep with them. They're still going to offer it to them because that's the tradition. Like they never really addressed in this article the fact that women protect the pastors. Women don't say anything. Women don't reprimand or punish pastors that cross the line. Now, a simple grab here or there, that's one thing. But when you're actually openly harassing one of your members by them walking in your office and them asking what color panties you're wearing, and you're in a position of authority, that shouldn't happen. But it's allowed, and they all know about it because all these women gossip. But I do believe that the Me Too movement, if it does get going in the black church, and it looks like it might, because the pastor at Aretha Franklin's funeral grabbed a woman, but he grabbed a white woman that was noticeable, that kicked up a stink. And for this one, I would say bravo, clean it up. In fact, drive all the men out of the black church and let men and women go to church separately. Because the reason that the black church has so few male members is because the black church is not designed for men. Men deal with logic, women deal with emotion. What do you get in the black church? You get emotion. Their approach, the organization of the program is all geared for emotion and not logic. That doesn't appeal to the vast majority of men. That's how come you have the 80-20 rule inside the church. Only 20% of the men are actually going, and those numbers are dropping. So I think it's a good thing. Me Too, I've never looked at Me Too as a bad thing. I looked at Me Too as a necessary evil. I know a lot of MGTOWs and IBMORs think Me Too is horrible, but I think it's a good thing because it's going to burn away a lot of this bullshit. Anyway, short and sweet, I'm going to jump off of here. I hadn't done any Me Too in a while, and this one caught my eye. I have another one to do that also caught my eye, and I'll be right back with it. Peace.